Roger Federer is tennis's vision splendid, an impossible concoction of grace, style, power, and finesse. He traced the footsteps of two left-handers, Rod Laver and John McEnroe, who left their own legacy for the game. And Steffi Graf, winner of the unique Golden Slam. 4 tennis players who left an indelible mark. This is the Immortals. He puts a compelling case to be called the greatest of all tennis players. Roger Federer's 18 Grand Slam singles titles is the mountain that other great players will confront when they start out in the game. It took him 14 years to build, from his breakthrough at Wimbledon in 2003 to his fairy tale Australian Open win in Melbourne in 2017, 5 years after his previous major. In 2009, he had overtaken Pete Sampras's all-time men's record of 14 Grand Slam singles titles when he won at Wimbledon. He did it with uncommon grace and became arguably the most popular athlete in the world. A 2016 ESPN survey, the World Fame 100, had him in the top 5, just behind Cristiano Ronaldo, LeBron James, Lionel Messi, and Neymar Jr., megastars from the world of football and basketball. But virtually all of the others have their detractors. Ever-smiling Federer has none to speak of. None of them was loved more than the Swiss tennis maestro, a class act in every possible way, and a man who can draw adulation from the most neutral crowd in any corner of the planet.
I'm happy with my momentum, like you mentioned. I feel like I'm playing great. I'm injury-free. I'm mentally ready to do sacrifices and work hard and make it happen for me, but then other guys are playing well as well.
The phenomenon of Fed love has been discussed since 2006, when the late David Foster Wallace, a great American writer, penned a New York Times essay that suggested it was a metaphysical aspect that made people take notice. The metaphysical explanation is that Roger Federer is one of those rare preternatural athletes who appear to be exempt, at least in part, from certain physical laws. It's true that he has played hundreds of what might be called impossible shots in his career, yet his fundamentals are beautifully sound. Powerful and unerring service, great forehand, delectable one-handed backhand, sharp net play. There are no weaknesses. Of all his opponents, only Rafael Nadal, the relentless top-spinning Spanish left-hander, has had any sustained success against him. Even after Federer overcame Nadal in their classic Australian Open final in January 2017, the Spaniard had a 23-12 win-loss record against him. But Nadal had fallen 4 Grand Slam singles titles behind his great rival, 14 to Federer's 18, although the picture may not yet be completed.
Particularly this one, maybe it's a bit of a fairy tale, you know, after the comeback, to come back this way. So on so many levels, I just felt like a lot of people were happy, you know, and that's almost more important than me being happy that I was able to do it and win an 18th. But of course, it was always going to be super special beating Nadal in the finals.
Still to come on the Immortals, Federer's off-court passion.
I'm so happy and emotional that I can see a preschool of this quality here in Malawi. I must say it's quite extraordinary, actually, and it makes me really, really happy.
Roger Federer's reputation as a tennis player is universal. His reputation as a philanthropist is not so well known. The Roger Federer Foundation, which he set up more than a decade ago, has built more than 50 preschools in the African nation of Malawi, where poverty has been at critical levels for years. In 2015, the tennis superstar paid a visit to the townships where he is supporting the government's early childhood development program. Federer sat in on classes, helped with cooking lessons, and soaked up the atmosphere of what his foundation had created. The cost has been more than $10 million, but the foundation, which has helped 250,000 children with its work, hopes to increase that to a figure of 1 million children.
I learned a lot, and I thought it was an unforgettable journey of learning for me personally as well. I feel like the kids are having a great time. It's so inspiring and motivating every time I come to a beautiful country like Malawi this time. It's my first time here. And of course, I'll keep going. We have high goals for the Roger Federer Foundation to reach 1 million children that can benefit from the foundation, because children are tomorrow's future.
For all the grace and effortlessness of Roger Federer's tennis, he has added a further paragraph to his curriculum vitae in later years, and that is longevity. He won his 17th Grand Slam singles title and his 7th Wimbledon at 30 years of age in 2012. 5 years on, despite being overtaken at the top of the rankings by Novak Djokovic and others, the Swiss veteran refused to move into his dotage as a player. His bid for an 18th title had been torturous, with disappointments and inevitable injuries mixed with the joy of Switzerland's first Davis Cup victory in 2014. 3 times in 2014 and 2015, he went to Slam finals but was beaten, each time by the brilliant Djokovic, at Wimbledon twice and at the US Open. What happened at Melbourne in 2017 at the Australian Open was the stuff of fairy tale. Federer, by then aged 35, had taken 6 months off at the end of 2016 because of a knee injury, and came to Melbourne with no expectations and an almost disrespectful number 17 seeding. Then the draw opened up for him, Djokovic falling in the second round, and Andy Murray of Scotland, the number 1 seed, in the 4th. It would become the old-timers Grand Slam, with the Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, qualifying for the women's final well into their 30s. Federer's opponent in the final had a nice ring to it. At 30, Rafael Nadal found his way through to meet his old friend and rival for the 9th time in a Grand Slam final. Their rendezvous was epic, as the eyes of the world fell on Australia. They played one of the greatest tennis matches ever on Rod Laver Arena. It went to 5 sets, and when Nadal took a break of serve early in the decider, Roger Federer seemed destined for another disappointment against the closest thing he has ever encountered to a nemesis. But he would not be denied. Federer peeled off 4 consecutive games from a 2-3 deficit to reel in Nadal and win the 5th set 6-3, taking the title in 3 hours, 37 minutes. His face at the moment revealed unbridled joy.
A long night, but it was a lot of fun, and everybody was in such a good mood. It was a special day, you know, a special week, really, a couple of weeks, and then it finished off with in a great way, just being silly and having fun, and just you know, forgetting about everything. All the pressure went away, and we were just all celebrating. It was great.
Federer became the oldest Grand Slam singles champion since the Australian Ken Rosewall won his home open in 1972 at 37 years of age, more than 4 decades earlier. Rosewall won 3 slams beyond 35. Who is to say Federer cannot manage something similar? But if he does not, this was a nice little exclamation mark on what is a sensational career.
Yeah, I mean, there will always be a future good player, a future nice player to watch, with my kind of attitude. But I hope that nobody tries to copy me, because I think copying is bad. Like, they shouldn't copy any other player. I believe you should find your own style and be natural, be yourself. You know, don't try to pretend you're somebody else. And it served me well, anyways.
For Roger Federer, the usual rules just don't apply. Up next on the Immortals, two left-handers with contrasting styles, Rod Laver and John McEnroe. He twice won tennis's Grand Slam, the only person to do so.
It's all Australia in the men's finals, which has Rod Laver in the far court pitted against Roy Emerson. Laver has won the Wimbledon, Australian, and French championships, and his smashing serves today volley him into the first Grand Slam since 1938.
Rod Laver twice achieved something that only one other man has managed in tennis: the winning of the 4 Grand Slam titles in a calendar year, the Australian, French, and US Opens, and Wimbledon.
Moment of truth. This is match point. And a new Grand Slam champion. Rod Laver, the tennis wonder, accomplishes a feat that hasn't been wrapped up since Don Budge did it the year Rod was born. Rod Laver, Mr. Tennis himself.
The shortish, red-headed left-hander, who had emerged from Rockhampton in Australia, took the slam in 1962, repeating the feat of American Don Budge in 1938. Then did it again in 1969, after the tennis world had been shaken by a split between amateurs and professionals. It is a measure of his greatness as a player that in all the years since, not even Borg nor McEnroe, Sampras nor Agassi, Federer nor Djokovic or Nadal could match it. In the 1990s, the International Tennis Federation offered up $1 million bonus to a player who could win all 4 titles in a year, but no male player was able to collect the cash. In the 21st century, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic have all won 3 of the 4 in a single year, but never closed the deal, to Laver's disappointment.
I think it's good for the sport if someone does win a Grand Slam. You know, it's not something that, you know, it's not. No, this is not a club that I'm a member of. You know, it's an open course, and I think someone like Novak is, I think, well on his way to trying to accomplish that.
Emerson serves in the 4th and final set.
Laver is simply one of the greatest of all time. A net charger who could volley brilliantly, play on all surfaces, and whose heavy serve earned him the nickname the Rocket. Like Federer, he also carried himself with immense dignity and won universal respect for his sportsmanship and openness, especially among the modern greats of the game. When Federer won the Australian Open in 2006 in Melbourne, he burst into a flood of tears as the great Laver, his idol, strode out to present the trophy. Laver won 200 titles, more than any other player, but he might well have done more. He was banned from playing the Grand Slams for 5 years at the peak of his career, when the split between professionals and amateurs occurred. Even so, he won 11 Grand Slam singles titles, 6 before the split and 5 after the reconciliation in 1968. In his amateur years, he helped Australia to win 4 consecutive Davis Cup titles, from 1959 to 1962. Then as a professional, he came back and won a 5th Cup in 1973, when the pros were allowed to play. Little wonder the main court at Melbourne Park, home of the Australian Open, is known as Rod Laver Arena. And little wonder that a new teams event between Europe and the USA was named the Laver Cup.
But ultimately, Rod Laver was my idol growing up, and I try to emulate him and play like him. So I'm very happy to be part of this, and I'm proud that I'm going to captain and hopefully pull off the big upset against Europe next year.
Rod Laver, humble superstar of tennis, is an immortal. John McEnroe is more famous for his combustible temper on court than his wins and his triumphs. It is a pity, because McEnroe was pure genius with a racket in his left hand. With his distinctive serving style, beginning almost with his back to his opponent and his deft touch at the net, he could seemingly make a tennis ball talk. Tennis did not exactly know what had hit it. He arrived as the Super Mac, but by the time he blew up at Wimbledon on the biggest stage, a newspaper dubbed him Super Brat. He raged at the All England Club, traditional home of the game, and was defaulted from a match at the Australian Open when he was given 3 code violations in quick succession. He greeted this with an apparent shrug of the shoulders. I mean, I guess it was bound to happen. It's too bad. I don't feel good about it, but I can't say that I'm totally surprised. Yet for a time after that infamous afternoon in Melbourne in 1990, he lost his passion for playing, then roared back into prominence. His rivalry with the great Swede Bjorn Borg is one of the greatest in all of sports, captured in 2 consecutive Wimbledon finals, 1980 and 1981. Borg won the first of them 8-6 in the 5th, in what many observers believe to be the greatest ever Wimbledon final. The contrast in styles merely added to the intrigue. The young American with his outbursts, and the Swede with his impassive, undemonstrative ways. But McEnroe had his revenge a year later, winning in 4 sets to halt Borg's remarkable string of 5 consecutive wins in London to finally conquer Wimbledon.
I grew up and I saw this incredible place. It seemed so far away when I was growing up in New York, but there was a beauty to it just on the TV, the grass courts. There's a tradition to it, obviously, but also the way that everyone around acts and the reverence it gets. So in a way, I didn't get that in the beginning, but now I think that the players really appreciate that. I understand it a lot more, and so they've sort of updated in a lot of ways, but also kept the tradition, so that's a good mix.
Like Laver, he was slightly built, and no one took him for a potentially great athlete at school. But surging at college, he won an NCAA championship, and by the age of 21, he was the #1 player in the world, the youngest to that point. His 7 Grand Slam singles titles is only surpassed by 4 Americans, and his touch around the net also made him arguably the best doubles player ever. He won 9 Grand Slam doubles crowns and was near unbeatable at Davis Cup level. McEnroe's explosive behavior never really waned, and his famous line to a chair umpire at Wimbledon in 1981 has been repeated ad nauseum, so much so that he used it for the title of his autobiography.
You cannot be serious!
But McEnroe was nobody's fool. He knew that to get the best out of himself, he needed to be playing and competing at high-octane level. And if it needed a stoush to happen, then so be it. He never lost the respect of the tennis world beyond his retirement, when he continued to play on the seniors circuit and was named coach of the world team for the Laver Cup.
That's allowed to see these players again, which I think is awesome. And it's nice that the players recognize it. I think the sport, I mean, I don't think it's a big surprise to see that they can add something, the passion and the understanding of what it takes at that moment.
For all his antics, the ATP and the 4 slams always seemed to have lost a little color once he was gone. Still to come on the Immortals, the queen of tennis in the 1980s and 1990s, Steffi Graf. She broke the nexus at the top of women's tennis in a heartbeat, then took the game to another level. Steffi Graf arrived on the international tennis scene to a closed shop. Two players, Martina Navratilova and Chris Evert, had exchanged the world #1 ranking for 7 long years, alternating as winners of Grand Slam titles in 15 consecutive tournaments from 1982 to 1985. Graf, who hailed from the small town of Brühl in Germany, set about changing all this with her characteristic industrious ways. Introduced to the game at 3 by her insurance salesman father Peter, and almost immediately a star junior, Graf had turned professional in 1982, and by 1987 she was ready. Soon enough, she would be utterly unstoppable. Blessed with a lethal topspin forehand shot, a powerful serve, and lightning speed around the court, she was still a teenager, but clearly a force to be reckoned with. Aside from that, she had an unquenchable thirst for winning, a toughness that would shine out for years to come. I think I was always tough as iron, I think even as a child. Graf first conquered the mighty left-hander Navratilova at the French Open in 1987, having lost an epic US Open semi-final to her the year before. She would reach #1 in the world later in the year, but in 1988, the baton was passed even more unequivocally.
The other day came 17-year-old Maureen Connolly, already America's lady champion.
Only 2 women had won the Grand Slam, defined by victories in all 4 major tournaments in the same calendar year. American Maureen Connolly in 1953 and Australia's Margaret Court in 1970. Graf beat Evert in straight sets at the Australian Open in January, then produced perhaps her most ruthless ever performance at the French, taking just 34 minutes and humiliating Natasha Zvereva of Belarus 6-love, 6-love in the final. At Wimbledon, Graf took another step forward, coming from a set down to beat Navratilova in the final, a crushing 6-1 in the 3rd set, so that only the US Open in New York remained in her quest. By this time, Graf had embellished her feats by winning the Olympic gold medal in Seoul, South Korea, tennis having returned to the Games for the first time since 1924. In New York, she was relentless again, not losing a single set until the final against Gabriela Sabatini, a match she nevertheless won comfortably. Graf had achieved the apparently impossible, not only winning the Grand Slam, but taking Olympic gold as well. It became known as the Golden Slam. Only Margaret Court, with 24 singles slams, and Serena Williams, who won her 23rd in Australia in January 2017, have more than Graf's final total of 22, secured between 1987 and 1999. Her 21st came at the 1996 US Open, her 2nd straight US win over Monica Seles.
Yeah, I felt today I really needed to take time during points, and I did that because at times I was like in the end of the first set and a bit of the beginning of the second set, I was really nervous, and I felt like I wanted to really calm down and be ready for every point, concentrate on where I wanted to hit it, and I did that really well.
But Graf retired abruptly at 30, having battled illness and injury. She had also endured a tough period in which her father Peter had been jailed for tax fraud involving her personal affairs, although the presiding judge had cleared her of any wrongdoing. She had been world #1 for 377 weeks, a record, and her 186 consecutive weeks with the mantle from 1987 to 1991 has only been matched by Williams. She married the American player Andre Agassi in 2001 a pairing that could boast 30 Grand Slam singles titles, and they had 2 children. Steffi Graf, a woman who never especially craved the spotlight, slipped into the background, appearing briefly at her beloved Roland Garros, venue of her first and last Grand Slam win.
I think just being here, honestly, I mean, just kind of soaking in the atmosphere. I mean, there's certainly, you know, a lot of memories that go through my mind, but, you know, there's also a little curiosity every time I come back. It's like, what has changed?
Steffi Graf's records may be erased, but the memories will remain forever.